Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Sara, the Hype Goblin, and this week I'll be doing a Dungeon Master Roundtable. A few nights ago, I sat down to talk with Fred from How to D&D.
Hi, I'm Fred Wheeler, and I run the How to D&D YouTube channel. You can find me on Twitch, and I don't really use Twitch, but I use Twitter and I use Facebook, and I apparently have a Discord where you can actually talk to me.
Taron from Indestructoboy.
Hey, I'm Taron, Indestructoboy Pounds. I do a lot of game design focused stuff over on my channel. I am the designer of the Merchant, Dancer, and Runekeeper classes over on the Dungeon Masters Guild. I'm also a musician and music educator. So yeah, come check my channel out if you're into homebrew design, you wanna kind of up your game and make your own character options for D&D, come hang out.
And Jordan from Flutes.
I'm Jordan. I'm with Flutes. You can call me Flutes. Flutes started out as a website blog that my wife and I made. She goes by Opal, and we just wrote about anything D&D we felt like. It really was just a blog, and then it grew, and now we made a YouTube channel. But she has a gift for making formulas for magic items, and she has a great article and video about how to craft them. So if you're ever wondering how to make magic item crafting more interesting, definitely go to her video or join our Patreon to get on our Discord and get unlimited access to us. That's us. Check us out.
So without further ado, let's go ahead and roll that intro and get on with the questions. Wizards of the Coast likes to do a lot of playtesting with the Unearthed Arcana. Are there any rules from past editions, publishings of UA content that you've adopted as like house rules, or you still allow them to be a part of the game in some way, even though they don't make the official content? I'll go first on this one. For me, I keep unsettling Visage for Changelings. It was a cool mechanic. The one thing that made you look at a Changeling and go, yeah, that's cool, I'll play that. And they took it out, and it's such a bummer that to me that it wasn't in there.
The thing I'll say, because I mean, this isn't official in any way. Like, it wasn't even in the UA, but it was something that the first person I remember saying this was Benjamin Huffman back 2 or 3 years ago, and it was to flip the mechanics for vulnerability and crit. Oh man, 5e looks real good when you start doing that. Double the damage of a crit, and savage attack, or is it savage or brutal? I can't remember. The one that does an extra die of damage on top of it, just add that in there and then double the damage, like all good. And then vulnerability, you add an extra die of damage. It makes it to where vulnerability does not hit quite as hard, and you as a DM can like be a little bit more like, you can reward players that want to try and find the weakness of the thing in a way that you can't do it in a vulnerability system. Yeah. Because as it currently sits, because once players discover the vulnerability, that's all they ever hit it with, and it's going to get nuked out immediately. But if you just make it to where you're like, it does another die of damage, number one, they're going to roll more die more often, and that's always fun. Where our monkey brains love rolling out more dice, right? Mm-hmm. So like, you're going to get to roll more dice more often, but like, it allows you as a DM to get more creative about weaknesses in your monsters, because right now there's not a whole lot of monsters that have vulnerability in any fashion for any damage type in 5e, because it's that good. It is that scary good. Mm-hmm. And maybe like maybe give immunity and resistance a similar treatment, because there's just no reason to deal poison damage right now. I mean, there's not, even for like for levels 1 to 4, sure, go for it. You go beyond that, and it's just not it's not a viable play style. And I'm just like, some people don't like that kind of talk where it's like, what do you mean I can't do that with my character? I'm like, no, you're not going to have a good time. I'm just going to let you know, being told your thing doesn't work isn't a fun thing to roll up, like, we just know that. But like other like actual UA, Phoenix Soul Sorcerer, or Phoenix Aspect Sorcerer, whatever that was, I know it got basically killed so that they could make Divine Soul Sorcerer and not have anything really step on its turf. But with some slight changes, you lean more into the elemental side of it. Like, I mean, just make it to where I am the Blaster Fire Sorcerer. I mean, some of us just want to throw fire like that. You know, whenever you're rolling up a sorcerer, there's some of us that just want to blow stuff up, right? They had some cool core for what that could be. And oh man, I did a little bit of like home brewing to make it to where it doesn't really step on Divine Soul Sorcerer's turf so much. It's more about selfish healing rather than like I'm gonna dish it out to my buddies. But I love that thought so much of like, we need an elemental series of sorcerers. We need like, let's just go airbender with it. Or yeah, let's go avatar with it. Give us the pure fire sorcerer, the pure cold sorcerer, the pure whatever. Yeah. I
feel like if you do that, no one's ever going to play a Genasi again.
but design it in a way to where,
unless it complements that.
Yeah. Like let it, that's the thing. Let it lean into it, right? Like, I mean, if Genasi's going to get their innate fire resistance, build it to where it's like, if you already have fire resistance, you are now immune to fire damage. Or whenever you're hit with fire damage, you regain. I mean, it can't work with cantrips. You can expend a hit die, and maybe that way you have a resource tied into, I don't know, it's something like that. Like, I'm just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. Anyways,
people play Genasis for their colors anyway, right? They want to be colorful. As long as they're colorful, Genasis will.
I want to have fire for hair.
And Taron, I noticed you said Genasi and not Genasi or whatever.
Did I say Genasi?
Yeah, you did.
Oh wait,
Cave to the mob.
Did I really? Wait, did you all fix me?
I was listening. I was listening.
Yeah. Yeah.
My thing from past editions, and it's not necessarily what I would use in every game, but when I ran Curse of Strahd, I did use Exhaustion as a kind of level drain, because level drain was pretty intense in past editions, and it can really slow the game down. Even in a computer game, it makes you like drop all your equipment and stuff sometimes because like your class doesn't have the required. It's weird, but using Exhaustion for level drain to make undead scary again, I love doing that. I also like doing lingering injuries using Exhaustion. Those are like the two things that I wouldn't do for every player in every genre, but I really enjoyed doing those to make the game a little bit more gritty.
Okay. Okay. I haven't heard. This is the first time I'm hearing of level drain. So baby DM drain, here. Can you explain that to me?
So picture a past edition of D&D. You get bit by a vampire. You actually become a lower level character.
Oh.
And and when you rest, it does not go away. You know, stuff like that.
Okay. So that's kind of dealing like with scenarios where like you're leveling different players at different. Okay. That's I like that. That's devious.
It's part of the reason we haven't seen it brought back is because it introduces an element of tracking.
Yeah, it's so hard to track. I mean, if you really know what you're doing, like you can make it work, but it's not new player friendly by any means, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. But a little point of exhaustion, like I think that works well. I actually wrote a whole article about like how can you make level drain in 5th edition. And I gave like different degrees of like how intense you wanted to be. So I think it makes undead scary again. That's why clerics have like turn undead, because undead are scary. You know, so.
Wow. Before I answer your question, Sara, I'm going to respond to, I remember dealing with level drain, and we hated level drain, okay? It's because it's really tough. You got to earn the entire level back to get to the next level that you just lost.
Sorry, I single-handedly brought it back. Now everyone's going to...
I am traumatized. Thank you very much. So we used to have a little thing on the side that indicate that we had on our character sheet that we had level drain, and we'd have to go through and do that. But secretly, as long as the dungeon master wasn't paying too much attention, we would forget that we had, I don't know what it was. It's like for some reason, nothing else we'd forget, but that we would forget, okay?
For some reason.
We don't want to go back to that. I'm fine with exhaustion, but mate, I might forget that as well.
Is it just because you feel like it was overused by DMs because it was so good? Like if it was... Okay.
It was so rough. It was so rough. And it was the worst thing you could possibly do, because really the only way to deal with it was to have players track it, because as a dungeon master, too much going on, you're never going to remember it all the time. So if the players aren't willing to track it and they want to forget about it, it's going to happen. So yeah. Taron, I agree. I love causing fire. As I've discovered, I almost set my backyard on fire and my house with toilet rolls, fire, a bucket of water, which apparently buckets of water and cooking oil with fire and toilet rolls doesn't work, doesn't put it out. Yes, so that was floating everywhere. So
Happy Guy Fawkes Day.
It was panic day. Yeah, I'll never do that again. Just stick to Dungeons and Dragons in game play. Okay, so the actual question is, there are no rules that I've ever found from past editions or UA, Unearthed Arcana, that I thought I would transition into my game. I don't really like using house rules if I can help it. It's sort of part of the reason, but I've never seen anything that I thought was particularly useful, because they're usually just crunch mechanics, and I'm the sort of person who wants less crunch mechanics rather than more, or if there are crunch mechanics, I want them optional rather than them hard baked into the game. That's just sort of my way of seeing it. I know that sounds strange. How to D&D. I know I've got a lot of videos on rules, okay, but I'm allowed to not particularly like rules, even though I've done a lot of rules videos. So
Yeah.
What I look, I went through the beta test for D&D Next, and I got roped into the alpha play test when it went private, and so I am aware of what took place behind closed doors, and how fast the schedule was. So I'm a little worried for what they're trying to do now, because we're now in February and they haven't said anything about a public play test for D&D Evolution, and they need to get their act together because we're in a pandemic, so shipping and publications hard to get done. So Wizards of the Coast, get off your bum and get it done, mate, because it's not working very well. You know, surveys are all very well, but that's not going to be enough. The only thing I've adopted that I thought was a really good idea was from Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I don't play Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League anymore, and I used to be a league coordinator.
Hey,
and
same here.
Until I came to my senses. Retraining. So from level 1 to 4 in Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League, you can change everything. The only thing you can't change is the name of your character, the gear you're carrying, and how much gold you have. That's it. Everything else you can change. And I thought it was brilliant, because Dungeons and Dragons is complicated, and some people get bored, and we don't want them going into suicidal mode to kill their character off so they can bring a new character in, or constantly bringing in new characters. So you've got to, like, okay, what's your character's name today? Okay, all right, I got it. Thank you very much. So I use that from level 1 to level 20. I forgot about the level 1 to 4. I thought, nah, let's just keep going, because as the game, as you go on, it actually gets harder and harder, not easier. So I like that application. And in terms of taking stuff from older versions or other playtest material, I inject a lot of old school Dungeons and Dragons philosophy and practice into my Dungeons and Dragons 5e videos. Some people will probably notice it, probably the older gamers, and some of the newer gamers will think that I'm doing something new, and it's not. And I do that quite deliberately, and I will probably do more of it in the future, but more aggressive in the kinds of things that I present. So yes, we're going to be bringing back that barbarian summon the horde. We're going to get those strongholds going, and it's all right for every player character to have their own stronghold. You know, it doesn't have to just be one. So yeah, I pull a lot of old stuff into the new game if I can.
Love that.
I'm actually pretty shocked no one said bloody. That seems to be such a favorite. That seems to be
dad
such a
likes
big
that.
favorite.
Was that an actual like mechanical thing? Because I've heard some people refer to as like, I am bloodied, but I just figured like you're like, okay, maybe a third of your HP or something.
You're below half.
Okay.
And what it I mean, we see it in 5e. If it, like, is it null? No, there's a there's like a Shwagan or something that gets advantage on attack rolls against creatures that have less than half their HP. But I mean, it was kind of a cool mechanic. I'm seeing people that are trying to build off of it. There's actually Galder's Gazetteer by Zipper on Disney that brought it back and used it in a couple of character options, as well as introduced a whole bunch of really cool new ones. I personally really love Doomed, but like that's mostly from DM to player facing kind of a condition. Really sick. They any dice that they gain from healing are reduced to 1. Like, ooh, what? And they have disadvantage on death saving throws. Oh, that is like, ooh, there is a narrative in that condition that is so nasty. But other thing I would say, and this would be my last thing I just remembered. I have a constant gripe about the fact that confused is not a condition, and we are constantly referring to the effects of the spell rather than a condition. Make confusion the spell a different spell name. I don't know, but, you know, make it a different spell name, and then tie the confused condition into its own separate deal, and then make it to where, you know how cool that is to do as a cantrip on an enchantment wizard now. Ooh, like there's some cool stuff you can get into with that. You know, like Fae. I can't help but think that Fae would just have that as some kind of an innate, like they can just, you know, whatever. But make it a condition, because this is the thing that Pathfinder did right. You know, their action economy in Pathfinder is brilliant, but this is a thing that, like, I love a lot of stuff about Pathfinder.
A lot of conditions in Pathfinder 2.
Yeah, and that's just me being a Final Fantasy geek. I want more conditions. I want things to like throw at my players that are like making them think about like, oh, I've got this. I'm temporarily a zombie right now, or like Berserk. Berserk could be such a cool D&D mechanic. Basically, just make it reckless attack, but like you have to attack. Like you can only use your attack action on your turn, but if you do, like, shuts down spellcasters. You can do a lot of cool stuff with that. But yeah, that's my final thought on that.
Yeah, my final thought is it outside of UA, because I know you have touched on like past edition stuff. Outside of like the UA stuff, I like going to like the skill check challenges. I really love a good skill check challenge. It gets me as a player to think of my character differently, and it gets me to challenge my players when I'm DMing. If they all are doing the same thing every single time, well,
right.
You're not able to do it this time. You're gonna have to think of your character in a different angle. That's one of my favorite things to pull out of the magic bag.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I need to look more into that. This is.
I brought up on I think it was, I forget who, I've talked about it with so many people, but I brought up there's always like when you have like a group stealth check, there's always that one player that ruins it and feels horrible. So I brought up with a few DMs now about like, well, why don't you just turn it into a skill check challenge? Like, why don't you make them describe and roll something else instead, so they can talk about how they are contributing to the group stealth rather than just rolling stealth. It kind of, I don't know, it feels like you give that player that always ruins it for everyone else a little bit of an out.
They do that in Horde of the Dragon Queen real early. You got to make group stealth checks getting into this town. And I mean, it sounds like, I guess now I can see where this is coming. I just pulled up Jordan's article over here about it. Now that I see it, yeah. So this is very early on in Keep of the Kobold, or Horde of the Dragon Queen, that the entire party is going to make these stealth checks. And it is kind of averaged out to where it's like if the total is below this party size, or if the average roll is below this, then they fail or pass or whatever. I need to probably think about that more. But yeah.
Did you know that there's actually a rule in the player's handbook for group checks that say if half the group succeeds, the group succeeds?
Yeah, but you still have that that character that just dreads rolling stealth, because they look at like they'll have like a negative, or they're rolling at
to fail.
Yeah, or they're rolling at disadvantage. And it's just like, yeah, I guess I'll just roll my dice just to humor everyone. So I just
there's a reason why we have pass without trace. Is that you cast that spell?
That's true, but not every party is made up of characters who can use it. That's the other thing too. So sometimes you gotta get a little creative.
Yeah, you do. You do. We used to and have the heavier characters who made more noise and were like the jingle bells. They would cover their feet with slippers. So that when they would take them on and off, and they'd go and get some slippers made to go over their boots, so that they didn't make a lot of noise, and they would they would drop things over their armor so that they didn't clank quite so much to help reduce the chance of actually being detected.
I love that. That's fantastic.
That is such an old school D&D kind of tactic right there. Like it sounds like one of those bags of flour stories, right? Like you heard about this, like, well, you always buy a bag of flour.
Yeah.
Like, I just.
Yeah, I tried to weaponize flour in a game once. It didn't work out well.
Was that your baker?
No, actually, it was my bard. She also had a negative intelligence modifier. Yeah.
And if you're going to blow something up, flour's the way to go. It's very light.
Yeah.
It floats in the air. You just got to get enough of it floating in the air and an ignition source. And kaboom.
It was the one.
Something invisible.
It was the one time our ranged fighter did not make the shot. And she had gone and gotten jars of flour, and her plan was to throw them at the ceiling of the cave because we were fighting a Hydra, and it would just like rain down flour, but it would be in the air as well. So if it had worked, it would have been cool, but it didn't work. So, she tried. She did her best.
Happens.
Yeah.
That's because you're not thinking it's too little flour. You need more flour. You need like a top dressing plane. Like a top. You want to find the invisible character or blow them up. You got to have a top dressing plane fly over, drop a huge amount of flour, and ignite that sucker, and then they go up. That'll work.
Look, we were in a cave. And and my bard is tiny. So she had 3 jars of flour. There was only so much she could reasonably do. But yeah, no, it was one of those things that I was just like, I just showed up to that table, honestly, just to cause chaos. But yeah, weaponizing flour. You didn't hear that one from me if you do it at your own table, kids.
It's a legitimate strategy.